Hi, guys. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to Dharma Talk. I'm Rabia Ilahi. I'm a psychotherapist and energy healer in Houston, Texas. For any of you who are joining me for the first time, the word Dharma can mean many things. It can be our purpose, it can be right action, or doing the right thing. I created Dharma Talk so that I can share with you right and true information that I've had the privilege of learning through education, life experience, and all of that. Because my number one intention is that I can be of service to you in the highest way possible. And I also believe that if we have good information, true information, then we generally make better decisions, or at least have the choice between decisions, and that affects our decisions affect our lives. I wanted to do this show today on violence and mental health because I think no matter what channel you watch, or if you're on social media, violence seems to be becoming more and more common. And I say that because that's what I hear the most about. There are mass shootings in schools, churches, grocery stores. Personally, I think I've been in some form of fight or flight since about 2016, and have wondered if I'm being naive by not having weapons at home. But that's a fear response. And I think having one would affect my mental health more than not having one. Many of my family and clients, friends, express similar concerns that they're kind of at a loss of what to do. So I want to understand what's happening. I want to know what's in the ether and how our mental health, as well as our physical and spiritual health, is affected. So I have two very special guests tonight that are going to help us out. The first one, Dr. Mitch Young, he's a neuropsychiatric physician, board certified in child and adolescent, adult, and forensic psychiatry. It's a mouthful there. He's been in practice for over 40 years. He's a grandparent, so he wanted to make sure that I mentioned that. He's also a distinguished life fellow in both the American Psychiatric Association and the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. He's also a past president of the Texas Society of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. His clinical, administrative, and forensic practice is located in the Museum District in Houston. And I thought this was great. He said he's fond of interpersonal theory of Harry Stack Sullivan, who is new to me, quite honestly, who famously said, "We are all more simply human than otherwise." And Dr. Mitch also says that he doesn't understand most things, but he keeps trying. And I think that's a beautiful attitude to have for life. My second guest is Ayesha Lakhani. She is a licensed professional counselor and a supervisor, and also a registered play therapist. We'll get into what that is in a minute. And a supervisor of play therapy. She works with kids as young as 3 years old, as well as with adolescents, teens, adults, parents of the aforementioned. And she counsels individuals and families to achieve conflict resolution and have better communication. Ayesha is actually amazing in engaging her patients at their level, regardless of age. And for the little ones, our little ones, Ayesha uses play therapy, which is a method that was developed to assist younger children with communication. And in many cases, children don't have the language to express their thoughts and feelings, but they can do so in play. And so she's masterful at that. Ayesha also juggles being a mom to a soon to be 1 year old, beautiful little boy, and has a private practice in the Bel Air area of Houston, Texas. So, welcome, Dr. Mitch and Ayesha.
Hi.
Hi.
Howdy.
Thank you so much for making the time to meet with us. We have a lot to talk about. I want to make sure I didn't leave anything out in the introductions. And so along the way, correct me if I did. Okay, so I want to ask both of you, the violence in our society seems to be so common, almost to the fact that we've become desensitized to it. And I don't know what's normal, what's like always been, like, has it always been violent? We're just now seeing it because of 24-hour news cycles and social media, or what? Or are we in an unprecedented time? So what's going on, Dr. Mitch? Ayesha, what's going on?
You want me to start?
Sure.
I think that social media is obviously playing a huge part in more exposure.
Mhm.
And I certainly think things have increasingly gotten worse. So I feel like there's, especially in the mental health aspect, I feel like there is less access to mental health for a lot of people. And that seems to be escalating these other behaviors. I also think that the lack of education about mental health is also creating more of, like you said, a fear response in people.
Yeah.
And people are missing the signs because they don't know what to look for. So,
Yeah. Dr. Mitch, I saw you nodding your head. So
Yeah.
what do you think is happening?
Well, I have some ideas. Human behavior is complex and multi-determined.
Mm.
And as people, we want to find one cause to explain whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And life is not that simple.
Yeah.
Ayesha was talking about media. I think when Genghis Khan or Julius Caesar
Mhm.
set in the troops, that there was a lot of slaughter, debauchery, violence, that sort of thing. I think the media echo chamber amplifies and weaponizes that. You used to news shows,
Mm-hmm.
and some of this comes out of Yuval Harari's 21 Solutions for the 21st Century.
Mm-hmm.
Used to be the news reporter on the media was a loser in terms of income. It was a public service.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's a moneymaker.
Yeah.
And the more viewers, the more advertisers, the more income.
Mm-hmm.
And so the key is getting your attention.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of good politicians and prospective politicians out there who have fine ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And when they talk in an intellectual or academic way about it, our response is,
Yes.
And so the way to grab someone's attention is to hook into the feelings or emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And the typical emotions that the news media outlets play into is anger and disgust. This indignation is one of our favorite feelings. How could they?
Yes.
Child porn ring in the basement of a New Jersey pizza parlor.
Mm-hmm.
Disgust, to pick on somebody your own size. So
Yeah.
that's part of it. Also, there are state actors who weaponize social media such that they play opposite ends of the spectrum against each other. They don't just inflame one party, they inflame the other. It goes back further than that. In school, we were taught about survival of the fittest.
Yes.
It's actually a distorted view of social Darwinism. What he really said was it's survival of the fittest group. And
Mhm.
survival of the group depends on heterogeneity and differences
Yeah.
to adapt to a changing environment. And we tend to make it person against person. It
Mhm.
takes a team to win a championship.
Yes.
It takes a community to raise a child. And yet somehow we put it mano or mano, womano
Mhm.
against womano, yogini against yogini, however you want to say it.
Yeah.
And it's a distorted worldview.
I want to speak to that because we know that the human body alone is collaborative, right? All the parts work together. We know that plants and animals that collaborate and adapt continue. And so somehow you're right. The Darwin theory was, um, it's survival of the fittest, period, which is strength, money, power, weapons, influence. And so that becomes the definition of fit.
Sure. In terms of ecological relationships, what we're really after is cooperation
Yeah.
versus competition
Yeah.
or mutualism. We're all in the same boat. Nobody's getting out of this alive. And
Yeah.
yet somehow the distorted thinking or cognitive distortion is all I have to do is outrun the bear in the woods faster than you, as opposed to cover each other's back.
Yeah.
It's called mutualism.
Yeah.
Also, the United States leads the world on individualism versus what's called communitarianism.
Mm-hmm.
Individualism, everybody for themselves.
Yeah.
Communitarianism, not socialism, not
Yeah.
communism, communitarianism.
Mhm.
Kind of like more the idea of the Pennsylvania Dutch Amish new couple. They get together, they put
Mhm.
up the barn in one day because
Yeah.
everybody needs a barn in order to function in that society.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in terms of communitarianism, it's the theory that sooner or later we are ill, infirm, or legally incompetent, and it's appropriate to ask for our government
Yeah.
to help those people who, as a public safety function,
Mm-hmm.
or as a parent for those people who can't take care of themselves. Okay. And that's not communism. That's not socialism.
No.
It's called communitarianism. And the most individualist country on the planet is the good old US of A.
Yeah.
Everybody for themselves.
It has become that way. I don't know if there was like an inflection point, like a tipping point where um, it seems that there's so much violence that we've kind of become desensitized to it. And it seems to be happening not with grown-ups fighting or with bullying on the playground, as in, you took my soccer ball, give it back. Not that's not bullying, but that kind of thing, into extreme violence. And I don't know, the outward expression of the violence doesn't happen just like that. And so there are things that seem to be brewing, um, and we're missing it. We're missing it as families, as parents, as teachers, colleagues, friends, coworkers. We're missing something. But I wanted to get y'all's thoughts on on that, the inflection point, if there is one, and then also when we finally see the violence on the outside, how, not how long as in technically, but what are all, there's so many different factors on the inside, the internal world and the internal experience of one's world. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that before I talk myself into a knot.
So I'll say, just speaking to the latest school shooting right here, in Uvalde, this kid, and that's what he was a child, even though he was 18, everybody wants to, and this is not a popular opinion, but, everybody wants to create him into a monster. Mm-hmm. Right. And I believe what he did was horrific, obviously. Right. But there is some major trauma, and potentially generational trauma, right? That a lot of people, I think, live in survival mode constantly, that they don't even realize they're living in a traumatic world or having traumatic experiences. And sometimes it's just about basic needs, and trying to make ends meet. And when you're in that mode, for a lot of people, they're not thinking about anything else, right? Mm-hmm. It's just, how do I get from moment to moment, not even from day to day, And so here's this child, who had probably experienced a lot of trauma from a young age, with no outlet, no resources, no education about mental health, no place of safety to go to, right? Like, I just don't believe he had an amazing life and he decided to wake up and kill these innocent children and teachers, right? It doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. And so now the focus then shifts from what the actual problem is to, yes, gun laws, of course, right? But, we're still not focusing on the problem, right? It's access to guns, yes, but it's the mental health issue, right? And as they go into this small town, now everybody is aware they don't have resources to mental health, And so it's like, at what point are we actually going to focus on the issues, right? And gun laws are a symptom of, I think, what's happening, right? And easier access and all these things, but the mental health is the actual issue, right? And why is violence and extreme violence the outlet that people choose?
In a democracy or a democratic republic, we're supposed to defend to the death your right to disagree with me. That's it alive. So Ayesha, mental health issues are important. However, I beg to differ with you. Okay. In some respects. Okay. Most mentally ill people are not violent.
Yeah.
True.
And in terms of threat assessment by the National Threat Assessment Center, United States Secret Service, the two documents come out of 2018, 2019. Okay. You cannot profile the person according to socioeconomic status or history of mental illness. You can look for alarming behaviors, and you can have a systematic year-round committee with all the stakeholders to take a look at behaviors of concern with different levels of intervention, mental health, and or reportage to law enforcement authorities, okay? And so it could be a person from a high socioeconomic background who was jilted in a relationship, or who grows up in a Second Amendment family that believes in guns and guns early. It's the guns, stupid. The United States has more guns per capita than any other nation on earth. And anybody tells you that the solution is more of the same
Yeah.
is, how can I charitably put it? Mistaken. Teachers have enough on their hands. They can't afford supplies for their kids. They're not paid well. And now we're supposed to arm them,
Yeah.
okay? Or turn elementary to high schools into stockades or detention centers for children?
Mhm.
I don't think so. You need a committee year round with stakeholders to monitor behaviors of concern. The National Threat Assessment Center of the United States Secret Service has outlined these in papers. It's excellent, it's sane, it's rational. You also don't want guns in the hands of supposed normal people who are domestically abusive. Canada's been doing it for years, so-called red flag law.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of like nuclear weapons. It's a security paradox. Well, the way to protect the world is MAD, mutually assured destruction. So we need more nuclear weapons. No. The way you get gun violence down is not to have more guns. Now, I'm not talking about abolishing the Second Amendment.
Mhm.
I'm not talking about taking away guns from everybody. However, in this regard, it should be noted the sovereign, the body or entity in charge in a country is defined as that body politic that has the only legitimate use of violence. Okay. If the body politic or the public space becomes highly conflictual and our leaders become argumentative and attacking and crude and race to the bottom line or justify violence, they are role models for the rest of us, as are the adults.
Yeah. Which makes me think of Dr. Mitch, like in a family system, when you have elders who are abusive to each other and also to the children, which, any kind of physical punishment, I guess, there's it seems like these things affect our brain and our ability to think in a way that ensures mutual survival and growth, you know um and maybe these threat assessments need to be broken down and made public and talked about every day, you know uh
Sure.
because it is complex. It is, I mean, the way we develop, and I think you'll have more info on this doing neuropsychiatry. The way the brain develops and the body develops and how we grow our ability to be empathic and have social skills and coping skills, um, are we like short circuiting the development of that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The pass the STAR test is not the way to develop compassion, critical thinking, communication skills, cooperation, and conflict resolution.
Yeah.
Years ago, with an unmentioned governor of the state, who was then promoted to national politics, famously or infamously said, "We don't want any of that airy fairy stuff in schools."
Mm-hmm.
I say it simply, and I'm not the first person to say it. We coexist or we don't exist. There are existential threats,
Yeah.
thermonuclear weapons, global warming with famine, food, water shortages, okay, fires, hurricanes, and uh, runaway IT and biotechnology, not beholden to any political party,
Mm-hmm.
and currently holding most of the capital on the planet, unchecked.
Yeah.
And if there's somebody in office who's not talking about one of those three issues, global warming, nukes, regulation of IT, meta, and biotechnology, then they're dog whistle issues throwing you meat to become emotionally involved.
Yeah.
Abortion, immigration,
Mm-hmm.
that's not going to kill us.
Yeah. Brown people.
Right.
Black people.
Florence Perkins was the first female cabinet member who was head of the Department of Labor, and she instituted fair labor laws and 40-hour work week. And she famously said, one of the social justice is one of the implications of loving thy neighbor.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have people reacting violently
Mm-hmm.
and in extremist positions, not to allow discussion of those issues in school.
Yeah.
It's the exact opposite of what we need.
So we develop then more of, I guess, being fully human in our connections to other people, to our environment, to nature. Like I talk a lot about coming from fear, coming from a place of I'm safe and I love, because the safety allows the other things, and safety is very literal and also subjective. It's what we experience and label as safe or unsafe. Ayesha, I want to speak to the point of the 18-year-old and that he and the suicidal inclinations of some of these mass shooters, and kind of what you're seeing in your practice with little kids and teens, where either they're not getting support, they're not being seen, heard. Like, tell me what your experience is, or how would you know that if this 18-year-old you had seen when he was 4 or 5, what would you be looking for?
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, ironically enough, right? So I see a good number of like little kids, which I see a lot of behavioral issues, and I can see the frustration in parents, right? Just the burnout of dealing with, kids that are constantly acting out, right? And can't figure out why. Things are consistent, there's a routine, but there's something, right, that is causing them to behave in a certain way. And so when the parents hit the point of just complete frustration, it's like they in a sense lose their ability to parent this child in a safe, loving way, right? And I can see it from both sides, right? Some kids are just tough, and for whatever reason, whatever environmental things or experiences that they've had, or, family things that are occurring in the home, external stressors and tension, right? But I've seen a lot of that, right? And trying to help parents then get to a point where they can see that their child is struggling and suffering, right? But so are the parents, right? So there's this delicate balance of like treating the whole system, right? And obviously it falls on the parents, right? Because they're the adults and they're supposed to be more in control, right? But they're not. If there's anything I've learned in the last year, even prior to like giving birth, my kid was always in control, right? Even when I was pregnant, my kid was in control, and it took me like a while to realize that I'm not in control. So my job is to create the safest environment that I can create for you to grow and feel safe enough to be who you need to be.
Yeah.
Right. And so then as these kids get older, the preteens and the teens, it's all about a disconnection from mom and dad.
Yeah.
Right. Mom and dad can't understand. I try to talk to them and they can't hear me. They say, oh, well, that's not a big deal. Or you don't know what real problems are. Or it's very dismissive, at least from the child's perspective. Right. And again, it goes back to parents trying to deal with external stressors, work, making ends meet. There's a multitude of things, right, that the kids are also not privy to, and they shouldn't be,
Yeah.
right? But there's that disconnect of mom and dad are so disconnected that here I am struggling and feeling anxiety and trying to express that and seek help. And I don't know where to go. Right. And so as they get older, like I have, some kiddos that are in high school. And so now we're going into the transition of, senior year, college, and it's like my parents aren't there to have those conversations with me, So I definitely see it, and I can easily see how some of these kiddos can, make a turn, because they don't have an outlet. And when they do have an outlet, they don't know necessarily how to express themselves, because it's like, well, you're another grown up. Are you actually going to hear what I'm saying? And what can you do to help me? Because I'm only here for an hour a week with you. How can you literally help change and shift the rest of my life?
Yeah.
Right. So it's a challenge.
Congratulations on your newborn, Ayesha.
Thank you.
I've heard tell they're cheaper by the dozen.
Yeah. Well, kids are tough. And, well, we're assuming some things, right? It's a 2-parent household.
Right.
There's enough knowledge or awareness of mental health to even go seek therapy for their kids.
Mm-hmm.
And then whether or not they have insurance, can they afford,
Right.
because there isn't a focus on mental health and funding mental health and the awareness of mental health, which is part of tonight. I want to get into also is, what are we looking for in the people around us, especially the young people? What are we looking for that may not be as obvious as, little Timmy is killing dogs, or torturing. I mean, those are the things that are blatant.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in it would seem like in a wealthy country like the United States, we would want to make sure that the least of us, least opportunity, access, ability, would have as much information, and like we would do everything as we could as what did you call it, Dr. Mitch? Not socialism, not
Mutualism or
mutualism,
communitarianism.
communitarianism. That how do we then consider other people part of our world community?
There's what I think about myself and the perceived appraisal of significant others.
Mm-hmm.
So part of my reality testing is self-directed and part is other-directed. Mm-hmm. We're individuals and we're members of groups. And both are important, and there needs to be a balance. And children learn what they live. However, you cannot always attribute it to an unhealthy caretaking environment. Chess and Thomas wrote a book decades ago, called Temperament. Mm-hmm. And one of the temperaments of babies were dysphoric, cranky, whatever I do, they're always crying, pushing me away, phobic about touch, defensive. And in fact, they call those kids mother killers because the mothers were exhausted in spite of their best efforts. Mm-hmm. Bruno Bettelheim, decades ago, wrote a book about autistic children called The Empty Fortress. Mm-hmm. And he pinned it on mothers and said the mothers were refrigerator mothers. Mm-hmm. Well, what he failed to realize is after so many attempts at cuddling and bonding and soothing, mm-hmm. and not getting eye gaze or coos or gurgles and laughter or whatever, the mothers become numb from the trauma themselves. Mm-hmm. So the retrospective assumption is if the kiddo has a problem, the family gave it to them, or it's a social or familial problem.
Yes. Yeah.
That's often true. However, it can also be, there can be a biological neurochemical component. Mm-hmm. And before I leave it at that, the neuroscience concerns the brain, the
Mm-hmm.
wiring. Okay. And what differentiates us from the great apes or the reptilian brain or the limbic brain is the neocortex, which is 3 millimeters thick. It's tiny.
Yeah.
Okay. But it gives us all kinds of cognitive abilities.
Mm-hmm.
The difference between neuroscience, study of the brain, and cognitive science
Mm-hmm.
is cognitive science includes the importance of our social environment, our relationships, and our connectivity.
Mm-hmm.
So the classic psychiatric unit of study for Freud was the individual,
Yeah.
intrapsychic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. However, other people said, and Sullivan was one of them, maybe it's the dyad, maybe it's the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I think both are important. You cannot, if someone's dissociative, you can't automatically assume they were exposed to deep, dark, terrible trauma and abuse, because sometimes it's the water dripping on the rock, or death by 1,000 cuts,
Mm-hmm.
or the Asperger's autistic, developmentally delayed, learning disabled child who's a little bit different and is socially rejected and or bullied over time,
Yeah.
and they increasingly withdraw. If I were in charge of the universe, and I'm not that deluded to think I'll ever be, okay, I would have at least 1 or 2 mental health days a year where I was on burnout 6, didn't have to go into work, and rather than saying I have a flu or a cold and lie in fib, say I'm taking a mental health day to restore and repair and charge my battery. Wouldn't that be neat? We all need it. The other thing I would propose is a national screen out day where nobody in the territorial boundaries of the United States could be allowed to look on their screen, and they would have to be in real world, in real life, looking at each other when they ate dinner.
Yeah. Okay, so speaking to the wiring, how would we know, or how would we recognize, how do we determine that it's partly physiological or temperament? You know, there are temperaments. I mean, we see them. We see them in our offices, in our outside office lives. And as a therapist, I do want to go back to what was your childhood like, you know, and what effects did community, race, SEC, you know, all of those things play in that. But I'm not as well versed on brain development or how we're born in a, as physical bodies, physical brains, if that makes sense, Dr. Mitch.
Yeah, it does. And what the psychological and spiritual perception is for the new human being and what the expectations are plays a large role in that.
Mm-hmm.
One of the questions you're asking, if I may rephrase it, is the parent wondering, is this a phase
Mm-hmm.
that they're going to grow out of, or is this a problem that needs to be addressed? And it's not always easy to tell.
Yeah.
Our daughter fought and screamed getting her hair brushed and combed before school for years. Come on, honey, we're going to be late. Brother goes to a different school. Mom and I have different jobs, do a career family. Yeah, you know, the guerrilla warfare at home with kids, getting ready in
Yeah.
the morning with different schedules on the refrigerator.
Mm-hmm.
And one day, and she would wake up in the morning with a big glop of bubble gum in her ear that she slept on and scream and yell, or she would take a scissors and cut off a big chunk. And everybody at school loved that. Do you know her parents are mental health professionals? Almost as bad as if your parents are attorneys or religious leaders.
Yeah.
And then one day I couldn't find her and we were late. And I looked around and I called her name and I finally went up to the bathroom and she was brushing her hair over and over again. And I stood there stunned in disbelief. And I said, "Sweetie, we're going to be late." And she said, "I'll just be a minute." Okay. And that was like that power struggle, and even your baby or the other human being in control. We could.
Oh, you froze, Dr. Mitch.
Yes.
Ah, okay. Yes, the baby child being in control.
So keys would be significant distress or disability over time.
Okay.
Isolation, withdrawal, mood lability, irritability,
Mm-hmm.
okay, loss of social relationships,
Mm-hmm.
okay, not developing normally. And of course, everybody develops at different rates. And there's social, spiritual, cognitive,
Mm-hmm.
academic intelligence, and different kids have different abilities. It's not like an orchestral score
Yeah.
where all those different avenues of development are all in sync and get played beautifully. And at the end, you're done and you're there. It's in fits and starts and spurts. So it's not always easy. If you're not sure whether it's a phase
Mm-hmm.
or warrants further explanation, talk it up with someone you trust,
Yeah.
with family members, with grandma and grandpa, with your faith
Mm-hmm.
tradition leader, with a mental health professional,
Mm-hmm.
anywhere you can get information. Okay. And in terms of child rearing, when and where possible, try to sidestep the power struggle, because in a power struggle, somebody always loses.
Yeah.
But let's get back to violence and where we are today. A guy named Daniel Cohn at Colgate College,
Mm-hmm.
philosophy professor, bearded dude. He looks like an elf with a big belly,
Mm-hmm.
studied forms of argument. And he said there were, are, and will be always three main forms of argument. One is warfare,
Mm-hmm.
win, lose. The only thing that matters is whether I win or whether I lose by any means necessary. There's a lot of that going on these days,
Yeah.
independent of reasoning or logic. The second is reasoning and logic based on the merits. And the third, I never saw it coming, which was performance, entertainment, like wrestling on TV with the hero in the heel, and the hero comes on and everybody cheers, and the heel does something, breaks a rule, and everybody sort of boos. The problem with win-lose warfare arguments is most of the world is not a zero-sum game,
Correct.
and there are areas of gray, and the context and the solutions can change, and nobody corners the market on the truth. The problem with win-lose is even if I explain, even if I agree to the logic of what you're saying, and it makes sense to me, emotionally, I have lost.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's a learn lose model. And in today's world, there's a lot of, it doesn't matter what the rules are. The
No.
only thing that's important is maintaining power and control. And that's going to kill us.
Yeah. Yeah. Aisha, how worried are you? Well, I want to talk a little bit about COVID and the effects of kids being at home. How worried are you? This sounds so fear-based, but um, how worried are you that we're not going to be able to get information out to families and teachers and neighbors and all of that about how to keep themselves and their kids safe, and other people safe?
Yeah, it's interesting because COVID added a whole layer of, isolation to everybody, right? And so with social media going the way it has been going, I love my teenagers because they teach me so much. I'm like, oh, what is this new app? Oh, this is how you communicate in secret with certain people. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing, like what they teach me, and I'm like, I can't keep up. But what I know is that all of that is just hindering their ability to have communication with other human beings. Like Dr. Mitch said, it's like put the phones away and just sit and have dinner together, you know, and have communication. And I think everybody's losing how to do that, even adults, because it's almost like you have to now communicate with your kids via social media or text, or, you know, nobody answers the phone anymore. And so I think as the world is changing, adults also are having to engage in this, you know, technology, and it's sort of driving wedges between everybody, you know. And then of course with COVID on top of that, it's just creates more isolation, right? So when all these kids who've gone to the same school for years and years and know their friends and all this, it's like they're like the anxiety they felt just going back to school, you know. And it's like, do people remember what I look like? I don't remember. Like, how does it feel to be in close proximity to somebody else, right? So all of this other stuff occurred during COVID. And at that point, it was just dealing with anxiety. It's like, we're not trying to communicate information. You know, a lot of people recognized that it was going to be hard to re-enter the world, as a lot of people put it. But they didn't know what that looked like, right? And so they had opportunity. It was like the best world for introverted people. They're like, great, I don't have to deal with anybody. I can just stay to myself and I'm doing my job, and like nobody knows any different, right? And it was the opposite for people who are extroverted and who need community and conversation and interaction with other people. They declined significantly. And it all happened so quickly. Nobody knew how to prepare or brace themselves for like putting things in place to help them be more successful. Right. And so in the midst of all of that, like getting information out is nowhere even on the list. You know? So
I like the way you put that, and I agree with you about the social isolation. The primary sensory modality from the earliest stages of life is touch.
yes.
Connecting physically. And of course, when you say that, a lot of people get uptight rather quickly because there's safe and unsafe touch. Okay.
Yeah.
However, our primary sensory motor learning in infancy is through touch. And in the absence of that, funny things happen. There's probably 7 to 9 kinds of intelligence, including academic, street smarts, social judgment, athletic, musical, those kinds of things. And this absence of social intelligence. My beloved wife and I were having breakfast out, and we were sitting at a two-top table against the wall that had an outlet. And two nerds came in, two IT guys, and they immediately sat down at a close table and took out like 5 or 6 cell phones apiece and a laptop. And in the middle of breakfast, one of them came over and without asking, powered up his cell phone and stuck the wire into the outlet between us without saying, excuse me, or would you mind if you'd have said that? I said, no problem. But then the idea of having somebody else's cell phone in proximity to our private conversation was of concern. I was so incensed and outraged. I unplugged it, got up, and just put it on the table and turned around and walked away. However, of the two IT guys, neither of them said a single word to me during the entire transaction. So with this emphasis on IT and the program to treat people and find solutions and that sort of thing, the Science and Media Lab at MIT had, with Gary Kasparov, talked about a competition between human teams, computer contestants in chess championships. Gary Kasparov had a world competition, and what they call centaurs, machine-human interaction, or artificial intelligence and human intelligence augmentation. And it turned out the teams that did the best with chess were the machine human teams. And the conclusion is the machines are better at answering questions. Human beings are better at raising those questions.
That I'm going to keep that in mind. The rule in my house, I have an 11-and-a-half-year-old, and I'm probably the worst mother on earth to her because she doesn't get a cell phone, until high school, depending on her grades.
Yeah.
And but yeah, it's she had first grade classmates with cell phones, with connection to the internet, and touch. So, okay, in these last few minutes, I want to know from each of you, what can someone do today, tonight, in the morning? Like, where does one start? We're in this field, so we get access to so much. Where does someone just start?
I mean, look, if you have a family, right, it's actually getting in touch with your kids, right? Making a plan to have dinner together once a week, start small, right? Make them attainable goals where it's like, we're going to sit and we're going to talk. And it doesn't have to be about your day and all heavy and serious, right? It can be light and fun. And, I think that's important too. Like, people have lost the ability to just enjoy each other.
Yeah.
And there's no lightness. Everything is so heavy these
Very,
days,
yes.
and so it's like, just be spontaneous, let's go grab ice cream in the middle of the day, right? It's summer, nobody's in school, just be spontaneous and have fun.
Yeah.
That's a good place to start. And I think that will help build sort of a reconnection, whether it's husband, wife, parents to kids, siblings, whatever the connection is, whatever the relationship is, right? Connecting to someone.
Yeah.
But I think those things are just a good place to start, where it's not like we have to have a plan and, let's stick to this plan, right? It's be spontaneous, do something fun, and connect with someone, right? Different levels of people in your life, whether it's friendship, kiddos, your dog, your cat, animals too, so.
I don't know about cats, but leaving that aside, no. When I was dating Dr. Sharon, she had adopted a cat behind where I lived when the cat owner went off to the Peace Corps, and the cat's name was Ned Spot Run, had a black eye and a big black tail, and I displaced Ned from his human bed, and the next morning I woke up to put my shoes on, and he had pooped in my shoes. And that was a clear territorial message. The goal in relationship is to bring out the best in each other. Take delight in the other person's delight, even if you don't have an interest. Make the human being feel heard and understood. You don't have to fix the problem.
Yeah.
That's half the battle. People ask me all the time, why does my kid do such and so? And I ask the parent, have you asked your child? And they go, no. Maybe it's a good idea to pretend you're an investigative journalist from another planet trying to figure out these human beings. And without judgment, ask, what are you doing? What do you like about that? What don't you? Gratitude journal.
Yeah.
3 things a day to be grateful for, rather than complaining about traffic or the heat or that sort of thing. And also put your issues in perspective, given the vastness of the universe, okay, and the potential vastness of your heart.
Yeah.
So the next time your kiddo or your traveling partner or your boss says, no, I don't want to, I'm not going to let you, rather than letting them steal your cool, take it as an opportunity for
Yeah.
gratitude and forgiveness. This too shall pass, as opposed to this, either I win or lose.
Yeah.
And these days they call that transactional.
Yeah.
Okay. Either I win or lose. Some people would rather be right than happy. They're not
Yeah.
happy people.
Yeah.
Yep.
So my recommendation is the solution to free speech is more free speech, or private time with your child
Yeah.
in which you suspend judgment unless they're fixing to get hurt. Don't tell them to chew with their mouths closed. Don't correct the fact that nothing they're wearing matches, or they misspoke or used a foul word.
Yep.
You
Yeah.
can call that unconditional positive regard time, and it recharges my battery. Although when my sainted wife does it, a little voice inside my head, being a guy's, why you may lose your edge. I'm working on it.
Yeah.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah. I will tell you what you're saying, Dr. Mitch and Ayesha. Both are talking about the heart, about feeling, about connecting, and being present with who, being grateful that someone is near us, whether it's a child or a partner or whatever. But the common theme seems to be, how do we create the feeling of connection? There is a feeling when you look at your kid and you're irritated as hell, and then you think about them like, okay, 20 years from now, I'm not going to have this moment. She's going to be up and out of the house and hate me or whatever. I don't know. And so maybe I can just be happy that I get to be irritated with her. Because she's still physically there. I still have her, and I can touch her and hug her. So yes, it is a work in progress.
I'm glad y'all are in the world.
Yes, you too.
Yeah, thank you. We didn't even get to your forensic part, but we'll do that another time. There's so much to say around violence and trauma and connection and community, and supporting our neighbor, that I think this is going to be one of many, many conversations. And if I'm lucky, y'all won't be busy and we can do this again. Because I think what you guys have said is invaluable to our minute to minute functioning, in a day. Even when all the crazy is around us, because there's a lot of stuff, around us. So maybe that's where we keep it simple, stupid, or whatever that KISS was. Keep it simple and just connect in the smallest of ways. Laughter, gratitude,
Touch.
Oh, touch. Yes.
Touch. A hug. You can never get enough hugs.
Yep.
That's what we miss most, actually, when someone passes, is the ability to touch them. So thank you, Dr. Mitch. Thank you, Ayesha. I'm beyond grateful. It's one of my gratitudes for today.
Thank you for the opportunity to meet you all and to discuss these, on the one hand, really complicated, on the other hand, really heartfelt matters. Love begets love, hate begets hate. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. And for those of you watching, I'm really grateful that you're watching. And if you think anything that we've talked about today can be of help to someone else, let them know. The video of tonight will be up on Meta. Sorry, Dr. Mitch. It'll be on the YouTube channel. And so, and then on YouTube, if you subscribe or set alerts, you can see all the different talks. Most importantly, I want to tell each and every one of you that the one thing I know for sure is none of us does this alone. And I think both my guests concur. None of us does this alone, and none of us is going to outlive. We're not ever going to get out of here, alive. And so we're in this world family together. And I also really want you to remember how much you matter. Your feelings, your thoughts, your love, all of that matters because you matter. You're a miracle. You're 1 in 400 trillion to be exactly who you are in this moment and exist. So, with that in mind, thank you guys very, very much. Thanks for those watching, and I will see you guys next time.